Video is aimed at advanced developers who want to reference the Google Maps API and program against the map object directly. So you can see here we have a simple dialog component that has a Google Map component on it, and there are three buttons over here, all of which simply place a marker on the map. So when I click this button over here, we're going to put a marker at 36 Bigelow Street in London, England. And then when I go here, we're going to put a marker on 36 Bigelow Street, Cambridge, Massachusetts. And then when we click this marker over here, we're going to put a marker at 36 Bigelow Street in London, England again. But this marker uses the add marker method of the dialog components map object, which is a wrapper around the Google Map object, whereas these two buttons call the Google API directly. So let's take a look at the JavaScript behind these three different buttons. So the first button you can see here, we just get a pointer to the map object, which is M1, because that's the variable associated with that map. And then we just simply call the add marker method. We give the marker a name of marker1. We type in the address, 36 Bigelow Street, London, England, and then we say view markers to actually view the marker on the map, which causes the map to scroll that address into view. So you can see it's really simple code. So now let's go and look at the Google API. So now we'll open up the builder, and in this case we're going to do a simpler case where we actually place a marker using an explicit latitude and longitude value. So again, we get a pointer to the map object, M1. So now we have our map object, and then we get a pointer to the actual Google Map object. So the Google Map object is inside the dialog components map object, and you get that by just getting the .map property of the map object. So the map object .map now, this Google Map variable, this now points to the actual real Google object. So then what we do is we call a method of the Google Maps API called marker, where we actually create a new marker and we place that marker on the map by passing in the ID of the map we'd like to add the marker to, and then we call the Google Maps set center method, and we center the map on that particular latitude and longitude. So we have now basically dropped down to executing methods of the actual Google Map object, and we can see that the code has gotten a little bit more complex, but not as complex as it's going to get when I next demonstrate the code to put on a marker where you don't know the lat long, but instead you just know the address. So let's go now and take a look at this next button over here, and here you can see that the code has now gotten a lot more complicated than the simple add marker method that we called in the first button. So you can see here we first instantiate a new instance of the Google Maps geocoder, and then we geocode an address, and in the geocode method we pass in the address that we want to geocode, and then we also specify what the callback function is. So this is the JavaScript function that's going to get called once the geocoding has been successfully completed. So this callback function takes two arguments, result and status, and what we're doing here is we're saying that if the status indicates that the geocoding was successful, then we now go and we get a pointer to the map control, and then inside the map control we then get the actual Google Map object, which is map object.map, and then we add a marker to the map, much like we did in the second button, excepting that in this case the location is coming out of the result of the geocoder. So result 0.geometry.location is the result of the geocoding, and then we call the set